Gentlemen, welcome on stage. Mr. Secretary General, let me start by you really explaining what quantum... No. Let me start by asking you, together with artificial intelligence, advanced biotechnology, quantum technology, as you were just referring to, is part of this massive technological wave that sort of with unprecedented form seems to be transforming society, global affairs, very much what NATO is at the heart at. When thinking about this technological wave's potential, promise, but also perils, are you generally worried or excited heading up NATO on this? Is this an opportunity or something to be fearful of?
I'm both worried and excited, and I think that's always the case with technologies. I guess those who develop nuclear technologies, in the 1940s, they were both excited and worried. And again, I watched Oppenheimer, and they were both worried and excited. So I think that's a kind of basic thing that characterizes almost all technologies, that there are big opportunities, but of course also big dangers and challenges. And that's in particular, I guess that's almost in all fields, but in particular in the field of security. They can be used to protect freedom, they can be used to attack freedom. They can be used to suppress people, but also to enhance the rights of people. So that's the reason why I think it's so important that NATO is focused on this, and that's exactly what we are. All these new technologies. In one way, NATO has been, since the atomic bomb, leading on almost all advanced technologies. And we had thought that was a kind of obvious thing, that we always had this technological edge. That's not as obvious anymore. Not least because we have China, which is investing heavily in new technologies, using big data in a different way than we are able to do, and therefore we need to. That's one of the reasons why I need to understand the challenges that China and the growth of China poses to our security, and why we have established the Innovation Fund, why we have established Diana, why we are developing networks and ways to ensure that NATO allies, public and private sector, academia across the lines are working more closely together, and this conference is part of that effort.
Excellent. If this is the Manhattan Project of the 21st century, the way you're describing NATO's role, is there something apart from Diana and the investment fund that you would hope to say, you know, if we are to really win this race, is there something additional you think we got to do?
Yes, there are many things, but I think you have to understand that there is NATO is partly what we do as NATO, and I think then what we have just done over the last few years is quite important, and we have put it much higher on the agenda. And David van der Eel, he's down there, he can go into all the details, our Assistant Secretary General, responsible for all these efforts. So these are the tools we use as NATO, also the Innovation Fund, the accelerator, the test centers, and all that. And we just a couple of years, we started to establish all these new tools. But of course, that's only the kind of the top, because the most important thing, where really the big efforts are taking place, is in the different nations. So we are in a way helping to share best practices. We are helping to increase awareness. We are helping to coordinate efforts. But of course, most of the researchers, most of the projects are national owned and national developed. And then I'm sure that together we can really make sure that we continue to be leading also in quantum physics and in new disruptive technologies. But there is one big change, or many changes, but one big change since the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. Because before, most of the new technologies, the most advanced technologies, especially those who are relevant for the defense sector, for our defense industry, they were state-owned, publicly owned. Nuclear Manhattan, that was driven by the governments. Internet was driven by governments, and many other. The jet engine, which was a big innovation also, just before and during the Second World War, driven by governments. So we used to own these technologies as governments. We financed them, we controlled them, and they were state secrets. Now, most of these technologies are in the private sector, whether we like it or not, and it's much harder to distinguish between, defense technologies and civilian technologies. So the importance of us working with the private sector, as a government, NATO allies, working with the private sector has become just even more important. But also for the private sector to be aware of that what they do has security implications. This is not only commercial issues. If you just share all your technologies with authoritarian states because you can earn money, that's dangerous. And it's really dangerous. So I used to believe in a kind of very clear division of responsibilities between governments and the private sector. But the reality is that we live now in an age where private commercial decisions have huge political implications. And therefore we need to develop, refine the rules of the game when it comes to the relationship between government and private sector, because if the private sector only seeks profits, will end up in a very dangerous place. You will share too much technology with states which will use it against the free and open societies we believe in.
Thank you, Secretary General. Minister Busko, let me turn to you. Most of the people in this room who are not quantum physicists will probably call themselves sort of talented amateurs when it comes to understanding this. Because quantum is technical, it's challenging, it's complex to understand for decision makers and citizens alike. What is the role of government to create trust, public trust in this new type of technology? How does the Danish government try to sort of avoid the hype while, at the same time harnessing the opportunities and doing it in a field that is complex to probably 99% of the population to understand?
Well, what we should do is exactly what Jens just said. I mean, realize that business politics, investing politics, trade politics on this area here is also security. So we have to create the right platform for investments, public-private investments. Just yesterday, as already mentioned here today, we presented the part 2 of our investment in quantum technology. We are later on today visiting the new center for that. I'm extremely happy for not only Denmark, but also for NATO, that we are actually able to have within NATO such a high-intensive environment as the Diana project actually is. I mean, it's a diamond in research and development that we have in NATO and that we have in Denmark. So I will say what we should do is to do what we have done within a number of areas. Take the fight against the climate change, take the work for a sustainable development. Denmark has been put in front in green technologies, green investments, offshore, onshore wind, all of that. With what? Public-private partnership, public-private investments, strategic areas chosen for long-term investments. And what you saw, what you're seeing here today, and what you saw yesterday, and what you'll see this afternoon is exactly that. That when we work together, we are able to create something that we cannot create alone. So to say, may sound like a really political answer, but it's actually what it is. We have to work together because we are up against forces, other countries, investments that are so large and so heavy that we simply have to work together. And then we have to have an alliance because this is, foremost, it is security policy as it is today.
It might be a politician answer, but a very good one indeed. You've also been the Minister of Defense, and so talking about this public-private collaboration and the opportunities and the ability to balance both, there must also be some challenges. Isn't it at some point that the national security interest where that sort of ends and the innovation opportunities? Or is there something in balancing this dual-use nature of technology? Is it sometimes choosing innovation over security, or can we have both?
No, I don't think so. I think we are in a completely other world now than we were 10 years ago. I think that's the bottom line. We are looking into a new kind of globalization. We are looking into a much more tensions between the US and China. Europe has to find its way. We have to strengthen our alliance, especially toward the Atlantic, and we have to use that as a fundament for handling top issues as, for example, security and investment in quantum technology. I mean, we are past the days where we could say that this here is a job to do for the private sector. It's not. I mean, those were the days. We are in a complete other global environment today, where competition is so hard, and where it's clear what we see, that competition is also about getting first from a security perspective. So I think what's driving the investments, and my view on the necessary or cooperation and investment, public-private investments here, is first and foremost that this is also a security issue. And then, of course, there is, for a small country as Denmark, enormous potential. I mean, what we have gathered here today, what we had at the conference yesterday at the Maersk Tower here in Copenhagen was, an enormous amount of interest, knowledge, investment, and so on. So there's enormous possibility for Denmark also, of course, here. But first and foremost, I think we must realize that we are in a complete other world than we were 10 years ago, and we have to take that into account when we are discussing issues like this.
Thank you. Mr. Sandel, let me turn to you as one of the very significant actors in this different global environment that the Minister and the Secretary General just talked about. Microsoft is a global technology company. Most of us use your products daily, I assume. Your products have both broad civilian use, like AI and cloud, but when it comes to quantum, also the dual-use nature of it. Could you talk a little bit about how you think about the opportunities inherent in quantum, but also the risks that you have to overcome, and maybe reflect a little bit what the Secretary General and the Minister were talking about?
Yeah, and thank you for having us here today. And I've been very pleased being here to see the amount of alignment that I've seen. First of all, I just want to concur. I think the strength of the West is public-private cooperation. I thought you captured it very well, Mr. Secretary General, on where these balances are and the security requirements that we have. So I just want to reaffirm that. As we think about this kind of engagement, there's three key things that we want to look at for guiding principles for our company, and we think perhaps they can be informative. The first one is basically around security and competitiveness. We have to secure our infrastructure, but while still embracing the competitive nature, and I've heard that many times, so we concur with that. The next one is what I would call economic and defensive readiness. One of the benefits that we see out of the technologies in areas like chemistry, material science, and things like that, things that could have impact both on sustainability as well as manufacturing. How do we get ready to both get those discoveries, but then figure out how do we harness them, both from a domestic and jobs market, but then from the defense perspective, in understanding that. The third one we think about is societal good. We want to make sure that when we invest in the technology, it really is something that is actually beneficial to all of humanity. I think that's really important. If we think about clean water, sustainability, we can unlock a lot of innovation that's there. It's not all just about profit. How do we make sure everyone has equal access? That is something we care about, all of those things. And when I look at some things that are concrete around this, as an industry, we got to get going on post-quantum cryptography. That's an area where, and frankly, a lot of it has to do with, do we have machines that can crack crypto tomorrow? You know, a lot of folks, I worry, they think it might be a decade out. The truth of the matter is, it would still take us a decade, even if we had solutions today. So getting a sense of proper urgency across NIST and the European Union, as well as the standards bodies that are there, let's pick those, actually update it. Go after national defense. We have to do that first. Critical infrastructure, super important to all of us as sovereign countries and for our citizens. And then we'll go after the broader ecosystem. Those things have to land. And then I think enabling the spirit of innovation, like I mentioned, we think material science is a great one. How can we use that for sustainability purposes? How can we essentially remove some of the reliance on rare earth metals and change that? How do we get less toxic systems out there today, like remove some forever chemicals and things like that? So these are the places that we think are beneficial. And of course, the defense examples that were given as well. So we want to make sure that as we do that, and the final thing I'd say, we do absolutely see a major role for government. You mentioned AI, that's another case that has some parallels to that. We might talk about that later as well, but it really does amount to, I don't think that as a commercial company, we can't be setting public policy for the world. That really doesn't make any sense. We have to have that right decisions around what is a responsible use of technology, whether it's AI or quantum or biotech, and then what are the ethics that we would apply around that. And that's something best done in partnership with government, not with private industry deciding what that looks like.